I feel like there's not a set definition to this, so don't feel like your answer is wrong. But let me ask you, what defines respect when people talk about your favorite college football programs? Is it we don't like playing in front of your fan base on your campus because of it's always a hostile environment and we just know that we're in for a beating? Is it Vegas thinks that we're really good and that we should be a conference contender and make the college football playoff? Is it we recruit at an elite level and that we retain as much talent as possible? The returning production is great and we're fundamentally sound every single year. And then do me a favor, what defines disrespect in your opinion when people talk about your program? Because the teams I'm about to list, they have a reason to feel like that they're being a little bit disrespected going into 2024. Real quickly, if you're new to the channel, what up? My name is Cole Thompson and I talk college football daily. So if this is the content you enjoy, smash the subscribe button, hit the ring notification because I'm talking about our favorite sport every single day leading up to the week 1 finish. And make sure that also you tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, and college football freaks everywhere about this channel. I'm trying to be the #1 YouTuber talking about our favorite sport. I'm trying to have the #1 YouTube channel and the #1 college football community here on YouTube. Follow me on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson. It's the exact same as my YouTube handle. So hit subscribe here, hit follow over there. And if you want to be a part of the Mailbag Monday series or have a question for a one-off video, email me, ColeThompsonWriting@gmail.com, or slide in the DMs on Twitter. Respect is earned. It's not given, but these teams I feel like have at least earned the right to be in that conversation, whether it be returning production, whether it be their strength of schedule, whatever it is with FanDuel, maybe snubbing them when it comes to win totals. They have a reason to be a little bit pissed off going into 2024. And for starters, it's Michigan. Michigan won the national championship last year. Like, we all remember that, right? Jim Harbaugh down in Houston beats Kalen DeBoer, and then both end up leaving their respective programs. One goes replaces the greatest coach in college football down in Tuscaloosa, and the other, he goes back to the NFL, like many people thought. And a lot of people are now saying, well Michigan, they lost everything. They lost their quarterback. They lost some offensive linemen. They lost some defensive players. They lost their head coach. Did they lose their aura? Did they lose their mantra? Like, did they lose their persona that made them great last year? Many people kind of forget that Sharon Moore took over for 3 games, including 2 of the biggest ones last season, and the Wolverines won. Well, now he's just the head coach. He's not the interim. And on top of that, they really didn't need Jim Harbaugh last year. They emulated this kind of persona around themselves to where they could handle business against anybody. Yeah, we can go ahead and talk about the cheating scandal, Connor Stallions, whatever. I don't really care right now. What I talk about is the emulation about what is the standard set in Ann Arbor and what is going to be expected from these veterans that last year were role players that kind of get to step up. A lot of the names that were left behind were recruited by Harbaugh. They were brought in by Harbaugh. They understood what was that brand of football that turned them from being kind of a run-of-the-mill of the Big Ten to actually right in the forefront of every conversation for a college football playoff berth, winning the conference title back-to-back years, making the college football playoff 3 different times, going to a national championship. Like, they were there for that. So when I look at this team, you still have Donovan Edwards, who probably would have been a household name at this point if not for Blake Corum. He's on the freaking cover of EA Sports College Football, so you know that he's getting a lot of praise. Colson Loveland, a security blanket and arguably the #1 tight end, didn't go anywhere. They had the best duo of defensive tackles, including, in my opinion, the best defensive player in college football in Mason Graham. They had the best cornerback in college football, Will Johnston. They bring over Wink Martindale, that is an exceptional play caller when it comes to blitzing, and their schedule's manageable. Yeah, they have some trap games here and there and certainly some quick matchups, but where's the fall off for this team? Like there's people that says, oh, they're going to be 7-5, 8-4. No, they're not going to be undefeated, but as long as whoever is the starting quarterback, Jack Tuttle, Alex Orji, Warren, whoever it is, just steer the ship in the right direction. And this is still a team that has a lot of intrigue that can, without a doubt, be back in the college football playoff. I just don't understand the negativity around those in Ann Arbor. Week 2 is going to show you pretty quickly that they still belong right at the cusp and right at the precipice of all playoff conversations when they face off against Texas. And Florida State, they're not disrespected in terms of win total. FanDuel has them at like 9.5 wins, but everyone's focusing in on DJU. Everyone is focusing in on DJU because if he has to replace Jordan Travis, well, you also have to replace Keon Coleman and Jaheim Bell and Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and a bunch of other defensive players and a bunch of other offensive linemen. Yet everyone else is saying, well, no, it's okay because we brought in Malik Benson from Alabama. He was at one point supposed to be the number one wide receiver. And we brought over Rodell Williams. He comes over from the Nick Saban tree. So he's got to be really good. And we brought over Marvin Jones Jr. from Georgia. So he's got to be fine. What if all of them are fine and so is DJU? Like what if DJU actually is just Jordan Travis 2.0? Not elite, not superficially oversaturated with stats, but consistently pushing the ball down the field. What if he fits in just like Jordan Travis did for Mike Norvell's offense? And what if, just humor me, Mike Norvell knew what he was doing by targeting the former Oregon State quarterback? Just what if all those things happen? Are we really going to say that Florida State can't win a national title? Last year, they went undefeated, and they went all the way down to the wire, and they still found a way to beat Louisville. They were a good team. They were a very solid, complete roster, and they've replaced a lot of that talent via the portal. Now, not all of it is going to be at the same level, and they may not be a national championship program the way that we viewed them last year, but they're in the college football playoff hunt. They're right there alongside Clemson and NC State and Miami. And honestly, because of the way the schedule bodes in their favor, where they have games against Clemson at home, where they have games against Notre Dame on the road, where they have games against Florida at home, and then the other matchups like Memphis and Duke and North Carolina, either at home or they're against an opponent where the lesser tier, you feel good. You're not asking DJU to be a difference maker. You're not asking to put up Dylan Gabriel numbers at Oregon, or I would even say maybe you throw in like a Noah Fafita numbers at Arizona. You're asking them, hey, don't turn the ball over, find receivers, pick up first downs, get us in scoring range. You do that, we're still a really good team. Like, I think everyone's saying that there'll be about a 9-win roster, but I think that we're talking about this team as maybe being a roster and a program that gets at least a win or two in the playoff. Here's another one that's probably not going to the playoff, but they sure as hell can play spoiler, Oklahoma. Everyone's looking at Texas, and everyone's saying, well, Texas, because they just went to the college football playoff, and they won the Big 12, and they have Quinn Ewers, and Sark is amazing, and look at the transfers, and the recruiting class, and then you remember that Oklahoma beat Texas in the Red River. Oh, wait, we forgot about that part, right? We forgot that Oklahoma beat Texas. Oh, they also upgraded at quarterback, in my opinion, with Jackson Arnold. Don't take the bowl game. Look at his entire resume from college and high school, and now go and use that as a baseline moving forward. And he has great weaponry. Deion Burks, if you haven't bought stock in, hate to break it to you, it's too low for you to even invest. If you bought it back in February, you bought it back in December, yeah, you just made yourself a lot of money because he's going to fly down the football field and he might eventually be an all SEC receiver. And if he's not, Nick Anderson will. And if he's not, Andrew Anthony will. And they have two great running backs, and they have a good defensive front, and they have a good linebacking core and an exceptional secondary. But that offensive line still has a lot of question marks. It is absolutely the black eye on the schedule. And they also have a schedule that may not be Satan's asshole, but it definitely is Satan's armpit. It's bad. It is brutal. But it's the SEC. Every schedule is brutal. In fact, of the top 10 programs that have the toughest schedules in college football, 8 come from that one's conference. So it's not as if Oklahoma is going to be going to battle with a bunch of teams that are just better than them, or that they're not really well equipped, or that they have easier paths to the postseason. No, they're all right there. And then again, Red River, everyone kind of goes ahead and says, well, Texas, they're built to win. Well, Oklahoma was built to win on multiple occasions, and they lost. It happens. Rivalries like that, the thing that the SEC doesn't truly understand yet, you throw records and numbers and production and recruiting out the window. You just go ahead and say it's 3 hours of smash mouth football that made you fall in love with the game. And I think Oklahoma, with this defense, with the offensive pieces in play, with the personnel, and with a really good coach in Brent Venables, they're still right there. They're still better than, I think, a 7.5 win total. This could be a team that I think gets to 9-3. 9-3 is not good enough to get into the playoff this year, but I definitely think it's good enough to be at least mentioned in these conversations. A team that probably is good enough to make the playoff because the conference they play in, Iowa State. I don't want to give a lot of credit to Iowa State because they're not a program that I'm very high on every single year. But here's what I will say. They return the most production in college football. That's it. That's what you need to say. If you turned a corner and Texas and Oklahoma are now gone from a conference, and look at that, it's a wide open chasm in the Big 12. And we don't know who's going to come away. Wouldn't you usually say, well, the team that returns the most production and the ones that feel really good about their system and don't have any change of coordinator, they'll be in good hands like Allstate? Yeah, Rocco Becht is back. Both your running backs are back. Jalen Noel's back. You still have your number one wide receiver. You still have your tight end. You still have 3 or 4 offensive linemen. I think everyone except for one starter on defense is back this year. And your schedule, much like everyone else in the Big 12, is a cluster mess to where you don't know what's going to happen. Yet we talk about Iowa State and we say, well, no, Kansas is better than them. Well, no, Arizona's better than them. Well, Kansas State's better than them. Where? If they're all right next to each other, wouldn't Iowa State have just as good of a shot as Arizona? As Utah? As Kansas State? But it's all Iowa State. It's Iowa State, so we can't put them in the same category. I don't understand this. I think Iowa State, they're probably going to be a spoiler more than a college football playoff contender. But would it shock you going into the last 2 weeks of November, they're sitting at 8-2, and all they need is 2 more wins to punch their ticket to Arlington? Wouldn't shock me. Wisconsin, I don't think that they're a team that you can say is going to the playoff. You look at the Big Ten, there's probably 4 rosters that you would guarantee stay ahead of them, and one of them is the newcomer in Oregon. But Luke Fickell is the reason why I think that there's optimism moving forward. Like, if you look at the 2025 class, they have just recruited at an insane level. And on top of that, they've done a good job of retaining talent. And the talent that they have lost, they've replaced pretty sufficiently. Tyler Van Dyke comes on in, and people forget that was a quarterback that at one point was viewed as a first-round pick. He was the all-new ACC Player of the Year. He also was one of the best offensive quarterbacks in the conference for 2022. And now you put him in with Phil Longo. And the schedule is manageable. You don't play Michigan. You don't play Ohio State. Yeah, you have to face against Oregon. But still, if your defense with a guy who knows defense like Luke Fickell can be sustainable, and you continue to recruit at this level, well, eventually we are going to talk about Wisconsin being a lot like Michigan State in 2015, where they weren't the number 1 team in the conference, but slowly you saw Mark D'Antonio just build this roster up, and they were really well equipped, and they were consistent on the rushing attack, and they had good weaponry. And then, oh, look, they're playing in Indianapolis for a conference title. And remember, for years underneath Paul Chryst, that was the end goal. They'd be the winners of the West, and they would punch their ticket to Indianapolis, and they would eventually be right alongside everyone else in top 10, and they'd get to a New Year's Six bowl, but they weren't college football playoff material. Maybe that's Wisconsin this year. Florida is not going to do much this year. Here's why I put Florida on here. There's been teams in the NFL. My other job is covering the NFL for a living. So Arizona last season, the Cardinals, people were making fun of Jonathan Gannon, just saying he couldn't get the job done. He was weird. He just didn't fit the mold of what you need for a coach. And they didn't have their quarterback for most of the season, and Kyler Murray. And everyone's like, oh, this is going to be the worst roster in the NFL. And they went 4-13, but it might be the best 4-13 roster I have ever seen. They were physical. They went down to the wire with several playoff opponents. They showed fight and grit. And that might be Florida in 2024. They have a win total of 4.5. I think that's a little egregious. I'd put it more so closer to 5.5, not 6.5. Their schedule is the worst in college football. It is so daunting. I don't even think Satan himself came up with the idea. But still, regardless, what I look at is just this squad, this roster, having great quarterback play. It's not elite quarterback play, but it's great. Graham Mertz last year balled out. Over 3,000 passing yards, 20-plus touchdowns, almost no turnovers. They also upgrade at wide receiver with Shamir Dike, a buddy that he knows from his time at Wisconsin. Elijah Badger, arguably one of the better yards after the catch type of playmakers. Oh, and on top of that, probably one of the better receivers that was in the portal this past offseason. They also bring in the USC commit, the 5-star. He's now going to be a part of their offensive line. Veteran secondary, a good rushing tandem in the backfield with Montreal Johnson leading the charge. And Billy Napier knows what he's doing offensively. So I don't know if we're going to say, yeah, they're going to be a team that is competitive and makes it to the college football playoff. No, that'd be egregiously awful. But If they were 5-7 and they were closing out games down to the wire, like they did against Missouri last year, use that as an example, and they just can't close the door. But they're 6-6 or they're 5-7, and they go toe to toe with the Texas and the Georgia and an A&M, and maybe you throw in an Auburn for that matter, and you throw in LSU. Like they go down to the wire with those teams, and they lose, but then they get a really convincing win over like Ole Miss or something like that. Wouldn't you feel better about this roster? Wouldn't you say that the record doesn't define who they are? It would for me. Two more for you. Oklahoma State is number 3 in returning production. According to FanDuel, they have the 7th best odds to win the Big 12 with the number 1 running back in the country, with 2 really good wide receivers, with a veteran offensive line, which let me go ahead and explain, combined has 171 starts. Oh, and let's just throw in that they have usually the ace in the hole, Mike Gundy. There's death, taxes, Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy kind of flying under the radar. Do you know when the last time Mike Gundy had a losing season in Stillwater? Oh, you see this? Yeah, wasn't invented yet. 2006 was the last time that we saw Oklahoma State actually regress. And they returned everything. Offensively, defensively, they lost almost nothing in the portal. The names that they didn't lose, they were replaced overnight. They finished with the top 50 recruiting class. Oklahoma State is not second fiddle to Oklahoma in the state. And now they have a very good shot along with Utah, along with I think Arizona, along with I'd probably throw in Kansas State. Maybe you want to with TCU just because the money and the resources down there. They have a shot to own the Big 12 and be the new flagship of the conference. And would it shock you if they were? It wouldn't shock me. They absolutely belong in that conversation. 2 more, actually. My apologies. West Virginia. West Virginia, they lost pretty convincingly in the 4th quarter to Penn State. And then they lost a few more games, and everyone was saying, well, this is the end for Neil Brown. Anybody remember what happened afterwards? Well, they found a really good dual threat weapon in Jaheim White. They found a really good running back in CJ Donaldson. They figured out they have a pretty decent quarterback, maybe even a top 10 player in Garrett Green. Their defense played sufficiently down the stretch. They also were able to get to 9 wins, and Neil Brown got to basically give the double bird to everyone in the Big 12 that voted them in last place. And here we are going into this year with Garrett Green back, with Jaheim White back, with their star left tackle back, with CJ Donaldson back, with a better wide receiver core, with more weapons on defense returning. 6.5 win total. I'm sorry, what? No, they're just like Oklahoma State. If we're going to say that the Big 12 is the fun conference and the one that's growing and emerging and showing all the upside of being exactly what we want for this sport, then we also have to consider right now West Virginia being right in the hunt. It's not going to shock me if the Mountaineers eventually find their way to Arlington. It shouldn't shock you. They have the quarterback. They have the running back tandem. They got some wide receivers. They got some underrated offensive linemen. Zach Frazier is really the only one of prominence that they lost. And they have a good schedule and a manageable pathway to Arlington and a manageable path to the college football playoff. I'm just saying, West Virginia being in the postseason is not the most egregious comment I have made on this channel. And it won't be the last one either. Kentucky, last one for you. Every 3 years, we have seen this happen. Mark Stoops gets a quarterback that comes on in, and he balls out, and he ends up overexceeding expectations with a new hotshot offensive coordinator, and there's a wide receiver or two that ends up having really good numbers. The defense ends up playing it freaking well, and they go like 9-3 or 10-2. Like, we've seen that for like the last 3 years. Terry Wilson did it in 2018, and then in 2021, Will Levis did it, and then history could repeat itself. Brock Vandagrick comes on over from Georgia. They bring in a couple of wide receivers, including Jamori Macklin from UNT. He was the number 1 playmaker in Conference USA last year. They still have Barry and Brown. They still have a pretty good rushing attack. They have a decent offensive line. They go out in Jamon Dumas Johnson, the linebacker from Georgia, that was a starter for 2 years. They also get a new offensive coordinator in Bush Handman. And just like what happened with Liam Cohen, and just like what happened the year prior in 2018, new OC, new quarterback, pretty solid defense, breakout wide receiver. It's just showing a pattern that once again, here we are talking about Kentucky. they're going to be flying under the radar, but when they cross that checker touchdown marker, it's going to probably be with an advantage and a win over a really prominent team. I don't know if they'll go 10-2. I don't know if they'll go 9-3, but I definitely think that they will be a spoiler for a lot of teams in the SEC this year. And they're going to be a reason why when we talk about, well, why wasn't the SEC more represented in the playoff? Because teams like Kentucky, South Carolina, and Texas A&M, they got wins over programs that probably were about ready to punch their ticket, and they got to play the spoiler role. But those are the teams that are being disrespected, and I absolutely believe that. Let me know in the comments section down below. Who did I miss? Who was I too high on? Who was I too low on? Make sure that also you subscribe to the channel, hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode. Tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, and college football fanatics everywhere about this channel because I'm on the race to become the #1 YouTuber talking about our favorite sport. Make sure that also if you want to be a part of the Monday mailbag series, email me. ColeThompsonWriting@gmail.com. I still got time for a few more spots in this week. If not, I'll get you next week. And until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. I'm back on Monday. Later. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But before you leave, make sure that you hit subscribe. And if you want to check out any of our other great work, make sure you click on one of the videos here. Am I pointing at the right spot? I'm not entirely sure. I'm really not.